Hey, what's up everyone, Rahupla here, and today we're going to play with the high-grade YF-19 from Macross Plus. I've been really excited about this kit since it was first announced because I really love Macross Mech, especially when it's in GERWALK form, which is quite unique and interesting. I honestly think GERWALK is one of the coolest looking mecha out there, so this kit really hyped me up because it will be my very first Macross model kit and I'm looking forward to building this kit. Also, we're gonna paint it later on in this video. Additionally, I also grabbed the water slide decal made for this kit, which is sold separately. Looks great. So without further ado, let's jump right into the video. And this is the YF-19 in the Batroid form. To make it short, I'm not going to dive too deep into it, so let's have a quick look at it. The build experience is your typical Bandai high-grade kit, which is great. The kit itself is pretty impressive at the first glance. I really like the overall look of the YF-19. The tan color works well which matches the anime version. The hat looks amazing with the clear visor part on it and a couple of color separations. For the chest part, I like the aircraft nose on it. They did a great job on the shortcut change parts. It looks fantastic. The color separation is also great here. The kit made so much effort just to separate the black and red lines like in the chest and the shoulder area. It just adds more detail to the kit right from the box. Speaking of the arms, I don't know, but I think the arm is kinda on the shorter side. It made the whole proportion look more into the wider side. Maybe it's just a me thing, cause I don't remember the Batroid looking this wide in the anime. I don't know, I may be wrong, but yeah. Moving on, the lower half of the body is impressive as well. The legs are packed with almost everything in it. From engine to the wings, it just looks great. The articulation in this kit is also nice and pretty standard for a high-grade kit. One thing I want to mention is the seam lines. There are quite a lot of seam lines that need to be taken care of. First, we got here on the thigh, forearms, back of the head, this part around the leg, back of the lower leg, the upper arm, the shoulder, and on the gun pod. Now let's transform this into the GERWALK mode, which is what I'm so excited about from a Macross kit. First, we separate the upper and the lower body parts like so, remove the chest and the arm from the abdomen part like that, turn the head and flip it like so, grab the special parts for the GERWALK and put the chest from before into it. Moving on to the lower body, gently pull the leg like so. There are two sections that can be pulled here like that. Next, we grab the front part of the fighter jet here and simply connect it to the leg from earlier. Align the thigh parts which are for the engine intake with the part like so. Flip the wing out and then rotate and connect it with the extension parts just like that. Finally, put the upper chest part from earlier where the arm will be on the top of the leg like so. And whoa, just look at that GERWALK form. This is the coolest thing I've ever held into my hand. It looks goofy and sexy at the same time, if that makes sense. And I love it. I always found GERWALK in the funny side, but I really like the overall look of this form. It's just the coolest thing ever, guys. The way the arm can spread out like that while maintaining the fighter form in the front is just insane. The cockpit has so much detail in it. There's even Izamu, the pilot of the YF-19 board in it. Speaking of the pilot, just look at how tiny this thing is. I have no idea how I'm going to paint it later, but we'll see. However, if I have only one thing to complain is that the articulation on the feet is kinda limited. I wish it could open up more to the side to make it easier to stand without the base and to make it look more dynamic when posing it. But still, it's pretty cool. Such a cool design, I love it so much. Next, let's try to transform it into the fighter mode, basically the aircraft mode. From the GERWALK, we simply remove this upper torso from the leg, grab this exclusive shortcut change part which is the back of the aircraft, we put the part on top of it like that, and here's a quick look on what if the GERWALK mode without the hands. Or the fighter with the legs out, I don't know. It looks amazing. Anyway, next we straighten up the legs like so and clip the small connection underneath it. Then we flip the foot like that, which acts as the thruster for the jet. And there you go, the YF-19 in the fighter form. It looks amazing and feels so good and solid in the hand. The silhouette from above looks fantastic. The inverted wing is so iconic for the YF-19. Everything is rock solid. The leg sits perfectly fine with the rest of the parts. I really adore how there's so much detail and panel line waiting to be filled in the fighter extension parts alone, as you can see right here. On the flip side, I can already see how the masking will be tiresome later on, because it's basically a bunch of parts that are put together into one big chunk of part. But still, the fighter mode is amazing, I love it. Anyway, we also got ourselves a nice landing gear for the fighter mode. So yeah, that's pretty much it with the kit. Now, we start to do some work for the YF-19. Let's go! The first thing I want to do is to fix the proportion of the arm a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, I think the arm is kinda short compared to the overall body proportion, I guess. So I start by cutting this part right here with a handsaw. After that, I sand it with a sand sponge to smoothen out the surface. Then I grab a ply plate, a 1mm thick ply plate, cut it small to fit the parts and glue it with the cement. I use a total of 2 layers on it. Then I cut and smooth it with a mini grinder. And this is what we got so far. Can you guys see the difference? No? Well, so do I. I don't think 2mm is enough, but it's there. Well, whatever. After I test it on the kit, I then fill the gap with a lot of putty and sand it afterward to get a nice smooth finish. The next thing I want to do is to remove the seam lines. The only seam lines I remove are the one on the gun pot and the shoulder. Since the pot is just 2 parts sandwiched together, the seam line is pretty obvious here. So filled it with Mr. Cement, squeeze the part as hard as I could, and after it dried, smooth it out with a sanding sponge. Same on the shoulder as you can see here. For the rest of the seam lines, I want to make the seam lines look more obvious. Let's start with the leg. Let's start with this lower leg part right here. As you can see, there's this big line right here from top to bottom. If I glue the part like before, it would be hard to paint later on because the part underneath it. So what I'm about to do is I separate this part like so, grab a hobby knife and I'm trying to find the perfect word, but I think it's carving with the knife sideways like that. That way, you make the seam lines more obvious and make it more look like a panel line. Additionally, I use a hobby chisel to add an extra depth to the line, and it looks nice afterward. I also did the same thing for the line right here and the back of the head. For the thigh parts, I did the same thing with the seam line, but I added another panel line beside it to make it more look like a panel line. Then I add a little bit of ply plate between those lines to add a little extra touch. The same goes for the forearm right here. I added another line beside it to make it more symmetrical. And it looks like this. After all of that, I begin redoing all of the existing panel lines with a hobby chisel just to make it easier for inking with the panel line accent later on after everything was painted. And that's pretty much everything I did with the kit. After that, I'm gonna wash it to clean every dirt and dust and we can start to paint. Before we start painting, there's this clear canopy part that needs to be masked beforehand. So I mask it with a masking tape for the edges and use Mr. Masking Solid for the rest of the area. To start off with, I used the Surfacer 1500 Gray for the base primer. I want to add some shading effect, so I use the Mr. Color Semi-Gloss Black on the edges and on some of the lines like so. For the main tan color, I want to replicate the color scheme from this particular YF-19 model kit from Hasegawa, which is not too tan and not too white either, kinda in between. So I use the color recipe from that model kit, which is 50% white and 50% Mr. Color Radome. I then spray the color slowly and carefully so that the shading effect underneath it is still visible. The color looks really nice. It's kinda hard to show it on camera, but it's not entirely white. There's still a bit of the tan here. Another thing is there's this wing part which is originally they're supposed to have those black section on it. I was about to paint it with the black color, but then part of me was really curious about how it turned out if I used the water decal. Because there's a whole decal for that entire section. So yeah, I'm going to try to go with the water decal for that. Next, I use the Jump Wind Flame Red for all of the red parts. I then use the dark sea gray for most of the frames. I use Mr. Color White for the landing gear and for the wall inside where the intake engine goes. For the canopy frame, I use the Jump Wind Snow Gray. I really hope the masking sole does its job nicely because this is my first time using it. Then, I use the Jump Wind Gloss Black for the forehead and other black parts. I paint the front engine intake with silver to highlight a bit more. Next, I use Mr. Color Steel for the foot, the hands, and some of the inner frame. For the gun pod, I use Jump Wind Green with a little bit of dark sea gray mixed with it. Last but not least, I spray it with the Mr. Color Gloss to protect all of the paint so far. And here's what's everything up until now. I think the color works really well, although it seems like the shading is a bit inconsistent throughout the whole parts. Some looks good and others don't. Well, I think it's fine. Moving on, after the top coat is dry, I begin inking the panel line with the panel line accent black. Then, I start detailing with enamel black on some of the thicker lines. On the cockpit, I brush the seat with Tamiya enamel red. I then start working on the pilot. This is probably the hardest step of all because of how tiny it is. Start off with Mr. Color Character Blue for the base color, Mr. Color Black for the top of the helmet. For the visor, I use my old mix of light green from my past work and slowly apply it with a needle, because I don't have that tiny brush people usually had. Then, using enamel light gray and yellow for the last touch to give a highlight around the shoulder and the chest area. And this is what the pilot looks like when in the cockpit. Honestly, it doesn't look that bad if you look at it from a bit far away. I also added the light gray on top of the seat and dashboard. Lastly, I paint the eye with the light blue. And for the final step is to add the water slide decal. After looking further into the set, there's actually quite a lot of color detail that you can actually use water slide decal, like the red part for the shortcut change, the cockpit panel, we even got the decal for the canopy itself if you don't really want to paint it, and more. Anyway, the very first decal I'm going to apply is this black section on the wing. It's actually harder than it seems. Since the decal is pretty big, I can't really move it with a knife or cotton swab. It won't budge at all. So I need to adjust the position with my finger. After it is placed in the position perfectly, I then apply the mark softer on it to make the decal melt onto the surface. And the result is actually great. I'm satisfied with the result. After that, I then apply the rest of the decal, which is probably harder because just look at this. The decal is so small and there's plenty of it. It took quite a while for all the decals to be placed. After all the decals placed, I then give the last touch, which is the top coat. I top coat it with Mr. Color Super Clear UV Cut Flat.
Lastly, I take this canopy from way back and take off all of the masking carefully. And thank God the masking soul works flawlessly, I can't believe it. Then I put it on the cockpit and would you look at that, the fighter nose looks so cool with all things together. And that's it, with this the YF-19 is finally complete and ready to roll out.
And that's it for my work on the high-grade YF-19. So, what do you guys think about it? I really like the end result. I'm glad the color looks nice, although some of the shading is not consistent with the other parts. The water slide decal also works great, giving a huge amount of detail. Overall, I'm satisfied with it. My thought on this kit, I just love the GERWALK, guys. It's one of the coolest things that ever existed. I really cannot wait to build another high-grade Macross in the future, which is the Durandal from Macross Frontier. So hopefully I can get some on my hand in the future complete with the extension part and be able to build it. And thank you so much to each and every one of you who stuck around until the very end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed watching my build, and if you did, consider giving this video a like, leaving a comment down below, and subscribing to my channel for more content like this in the future. See you in the next build, bye!